new generation. We are the youth of the nation. High in the sky. We are the new generation. Leader.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Leaders Dialogue Show. We bring on board seasoned leaders to share on leadership issues. We are privileged to have Mr. John Ng'ang'a tonight. Mr. John Ng'ang'a, welcome to the program.
Asante.
Mr. John Ng'ang'a is an author of 11 books, including Integrity, the Litmus Test for Good Leadership. He is a renowned public speaker. He is also a former manager at Kenya Shell, and currently he is a consultant in Taluma Consultants. Once again, welcome.
Thank you.
And today we are discussing the source of values and how does culture become a source of value in somebody's life.
You know, in previous programs, you have seen that the things you hold valuable to you, that you can even fight for them, will determine who you are, can come through nature. Whatever is natural is also regarded as good. And so it's accepted. So you gain some values out of it. Then he said the other one is conscience. That your conscience influences what you regard as valuable and what is not. Then he said you are bringing. The environment in which you are brought up hands you of some values, so it's a source of value. But then, now we want to talk about culture. Culture is not referring to your family of upbringing. It's referring to the people, the wider society in which you are actually brought up. What do they believe is the right thing? For example, if you grow in a culture that assumes that to have twins is evil. As soon as you see you have get a twin, you take off. They brought you. The culture says that in our culture, only caste people get twins. If you are brought up among people who admire twins, they think, what a blessed family. With 3 birds, you have 6 children. Wow, God loves them. The moment you hear your wife has a twins, say, wow, I am blessed. What makes a difference? The culture. And what is culture? Culture are the norms that a group of people agree on. What that group calls normal, valuable, acceptable is what we call their culture. And when we talk about culture, we are talking about values. What do they accept? Behavior. What do they accept? Relationships. What do they accept? That is what we really are talking about culture. So if you are talking about cultural values, you are talking about values that are acceptable in a group. Because it's possible for this family to value one thing and the other one values another thing. But there are certain things all families regard as normal and acceptable. Those things that the families assume are normal and acceptable are what we are calling culture or cultural values. Now, if you grow in a culture, within no time, you don't have questions. Because culture is not questioned. Culture dictates what's acceptable. So, in that case, once something is accepted by everybody, nobody asks a question. Like we said earlier, nobody may ever even give you a lecture on it, but you can see that thing is accepted. It also becomes what you accept, what you regard as normal, what you regard as valuable. So can you see slowly, whatever the culture has will not become your value. You will be saying, this is my value, but they are not really your value. They're your cultural values. And when you go to another tribe and see them doing things differently, you say, hey, how can they do that? For example, you are in one corner of Kenya where the body must be fully covered. If those people move to a place and they see a man greeting them on the street, having nothing on themselves. I think, how queer?
Yes.
But those people only cover what they call nakedness.
Yes.
And sometimes all they cover is the front and the back,
Yes.
a small portion.
Yes.
How come their definition of nakedness is determined by culture?
Yes.
And so culture will give you values which you call normal, which another culture will call very queer. They don't see how you can be having that kind of a behavior, and why you'd be spending all your time doing things like that.
Yes.
So, and it can be, even sometimes it's the way you cultivate. You go to some cultures and digging fallow ground is done by women. Go to another culture, that's done by women. Now, who determines what? You go to some cultures, you cannot thatch a house unless you're a man. You go to some cultures, everybody would laugh at you if a man started thatching. That's the work of women. They're the ones who climb to do it.
Yes.
Now, since you can see it's the same activity, but in different cultures, it's assumed to be done by different people. That's what we are calling cultural differences.
Yes, yes.
And those cultures will determine what you value as opposed to what I value.
Yes.
And it will be important for you to ask, do not look at another person's culture as queer and you as acceptable. You need to understand in their system that's accepted, in my system this is accepted, we should accept one another. Unless we can get another way of measuring, you are not my measure for what is right. Your culture does not determine what's right for me. It's my culture that determines what's right for me. So we should be careful about using culture to fight one another. Because you see, it depends on which culture you belong to. So we need to accept them as they are. But then, it needs to be known that in the process, we need to be careful that we check, is this culture okay? There's some cultures they say imepitwa na wakati. In other words, it's no longer for today. But they are culture. But culture is dynamic.
Yes.
What we valued originally is not necessarily what we value now. It changes over time. So your grandmother might value something which you don't value, and from the same culture, because they're very dynamic. The only question is, sometimes you can move from a good culture to a bad one. Sometimes from a bad one to a good one. And depending on what your progression is, you have good values or bad values, all of them, you are getting them out of your cultural, your culture. So you need to be careful as you talk about culture to know it's not static. For example, the Kenyan, the African, when he stayed in the hut, had no padlocks. You just returned something to close. You didn't have padlock. So you can't start calling padlock part of your traditional culture. There are things that are actually changing. Now, originally, a person who was regarded as rich had several wives. That was accepted. Now you can't start telling somebody they are poor because they're having one wife. The culture has actually changed. So we need to understand that there is a change in time, and that change in time is affecting what our values are. But the important thing that we are really emphasizing now is the fact that when you have values, you need to be aware some of them have come from culture, and then ask yourself, is that the right source of values? And then you ask yourself, does it the fact that your culture approves it, does it make it right?
That's true.
That's really what we talk about culture.
Yeah. And ladies and gentlemen, we are grateful for your viewership. Keep forwarding your comments on our Twitter page at Leaders Dialogue Show. We'll be right back after the break.